I was 16 years old when I learned how quickly a life can be erased. I came home from school expecting the usual silence, the familiar tension hanging in the air, the unspoken rules that governed our house. Instead, the house was empty. No furniture, no pictures, no sound. Just a stillness that felt intentional, like a message in itself. I remember standing in the doorway with my backpack still on, convinced for a few seconds that I had walked into the wrong place. On the kitchen counter sat a single envelope with my name written in my mother's handwriting. Inside was one sentence. You will figure it out. No explanation, no phone number, no goodbye. In that moment, something inside me fractured in a way I didn't yet have language for. Before we go on, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I really do read every comment. At 16, I did not know what I had done wrong. I replayed every argument, every silent dinner, every way I tried to make myself useful. I wondered if I had finally become too much trouble. Or worse, not worth the effort at all. My mother, Celeste, had always been sharp and decisive, the kind of woman who believed cruelty could be justified if it was efficient. My father, Harold, rarely disagreed with her. He stood beside her in quiet agreement, saying nothing, doing nothing, letting her choices become law. My younger sister, Naya, was gone too. I found out days later that they had moved several states away. They hadn't told me. They hadn't planned for me. They hadn't even left enough money to last a week. The landlord came by on the third day and told me the lease had been terminated early. I had 7 days to get out. I slept on a friend's couch for a few nights until the polite concern in her mother's eyes turned into discomfort. I told everyone I was fine. I learned quickly that honesty makes people nervous. I rented a small storage unit with the little cash I had saved from part-time work and slept behind stacked boxes, curling myself small so I wouldn't be seen by the night guard. I showered at a community center, ate peanut butter straight from the jar, and applied for jobs on public library computers like I had somewhere else to be afterward. I didn't cry much back then. Crying felt indulgent. Survival took all my energy. I told myself I didn't need them, that I was strong, that I would be fine. Those words sounded brave, but they were really just armor. And armor is heavy when you never get to take it off. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning, not just of the struggle, but of the long, quiet process of learning who I was without them, of figuring it out in a way they never imagined. I found my first real job a few weeks after being abandoned. A diner on the edge of town that stayed open all night for truck drivers and insomniacs. I worked the late shift because no one asked questions during those hours. The manager paid me in cash at first, slid the bills across the counter like we both understood this was temporary and unofficial. She was gruff, but fair. Once, when I nearly passed out from exhaustion, she let me nap in the break room before the breakfast rush and told anyone who asked that I was restocking. I learned how to move through the world quietly, how to make myself small, how to smile so people wouldn't look too closely. I kept every receipt, every scrap of paper, terrified that one wrong step would unravel what little stability I had built. I bought a prepaid phone and guarded it like it was gold. At night, after my shift ended, I watched free videos online about budgeting, goal setting, anything that promised a future that didn't look like my present. The first year was about survival, nothing more. I didn't think in months or seasons, just in days. Get through today, then tomorrow, then the next. I never heard from my family, not once. No missed calls, no emails, no messages asking if I was alive. I stopped checking eventually because hope hurts more when it keeps getting disappointed. The turning point came from someone who barely knew my name. A regular at the diner noticed how fast I worked, how I stayed late without complaining. One night, he asked if I wanted a temporary job helping clear out old office files. It paid 3 times what I made serving. I said yes without thinking. That job led to another. Then another. I showed up early, stayed late, asked questions, learned everything I could. By my early 20s, I was freelancing full-time. By my mid-20s, I started my own consulting work with nothing but a borrowed laptop and a folding table. I didn't tell my family. There was no one to tell. When I hit my first major financial milestone, I cried alone in my apartment, sitting on the floor with my back against the couch. It wasn't joy exactly. It was grief mixed with relief. I had made it, but I had made it without them. Sometimes my sister's name would pop up online, suggested by an algorithm that didn't understand history. I wondered if she ever told people about me, if she said I ran away, or if she said nothing at all. I thought about reaching out more than once. I never did. I told myself silence was safer. What I didn't expect was how the past would find me anyway. How success has a way of reopening doors you thought were sealed forever. The message that changed everything came after an interview I almost declined. A small podcast had asked me to talk about surviving family estrangement and building a career from nothing. I didn't think many people would listen. I agreed because the host sounded kind, not because I expected it to matter. 4 days later, the clip had crossed 1 million views. My inbox filled with messages from strangers telling me I had put words to something they had never been able to explain. I read every one until my eyes burned. Then one email stopped me cold. The subject line said, "You are still our daughter." It was from my mother, Celeste. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done. Just a paragraph about how she had heard the podcast, how she was ready to hear my side now, how maybe we could talk. A few minutes later, another message came in. This one was from my sister Naya. It was only 3 words. "We miss you." I closed my laptop and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. I had imagined this moment in 100 different ways over the years. None of them felt like this. There was no rush of emotion. Just a heavy, sinking feeling in my chest, like the ground had shifted under my feet without my permission. I didn't respond right away. I called my therapist, Dr. Lorna Fields, and told her everything. She listened quietly, then told me to give myself time. At least a week. Space to feel whatever came up without acting on it. So I did. I went to work. I went to the gym. I had dinner with friends. I tried to pretend my life hadn't suddenly become complicated again. But the emails sat there, unread and unread again. My mother's message felt cold, almost professional. My sister's felt different, more human. After 10 days, I replied to Naya first. Just one sentence. "It has been 12 years. What changed?" Her response came within the hour. She said the podcast made her realize what had really happened. She said she had been young and scared, that she didn't have a choice, that she had looked me up online a few times, but never knew how to reach out. She said she was proud of me. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Then I asked the question that had been burning in my throat since I was 16. Why now? Why wait until I was visible? Her next message was longer. She admitted money was tight, that our parents were struggling, that her husband Julian was under pressure, that medical bills were piling up. I felt my stomach drop as I read it. There it was. The reason that had nothing to do with love. I didn't answer. A few days later, my mother sent another email, this one with old photos attached. Pictures of me as a baby, of us at the beach, of moments that felt borrowed from someone else's life. At the bottom, she wrote that they had made mistakes and wanted to make amends. I stared at the screen, torn between anger and a hope I hated myself for still carrying. I brought the emails to my next session with Dr. Fields and laid them out like evidence. She reminded me that I was in control. That contact did not mean access, that I could listen without agreeing to anything. She also said something that stayed with me. Closure does not always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like a clear ending. I nodded, but inside I was split. Part of me wanted to disappear again. Another part wanted answers. And a small, embarrassing part still wanted my mother to love me. I decided to meet my sister first. Just her, no parents. We chose a coffee shop halfway between our cities, neutral ground. I flew in that morning, checked into a hotel, and almost canceled 3 times before forcing myself to walk through the door. I recognized Naya immediately. She looked older, more tired, but her eyes were the same. We didn't hug. We sat across from each other like strangers pretending not to be. The first 20 minutes were unbearable. Weather, traffic, the coffee. Then she started apologizing. Her voice shook when she said my name. She told me she had been afraid back then, afraid of our mother, afraid of losing what little stability she had. I listened without interrupting, watching for cracks in the story. When she paused, I asked the question that had followed me for more than a decade. Why me? Why was I the one left behind? She looked down at her cup and said something that made my chest tighten. Our mother had always called me the strong one, the independent one, the one who would be fine on her own. They convinced themselves I didn't need them the way she did, that leaving me was almost a kindness. I told her about the storage unit, about the nights I went hungry, about showering at the community center and working until my legs shook. Her face crumpled. She said she hadn't known, that our parents told her I had chosen to stay, that I had a plan, that I wanted distance. By the time we stood to leave, I felt hollow. She hugged me. I didn't hug back. I stood there, arms at my sides, unsure what I felt. Back at the hotel, I called Dr. Fields and told her everything. She pointed out that while Naya sounded remorseful, she was still framing herself as powerless. She reminded me that being young is not the same as being helpless. That hurt to hear because it was true. That night, my mother called. I hadn't given her my number. My sister must have. I answered out of curiosity. She cried immediately, told me how proud she was, how she always knew I would succeed. I let her talk until the words blurred together. Then I asked her the same question. Why me? Her answer was colder. They were in debt. They couldn't afford everyone. They thought I was smart enough to manage, that I would land somewhere better. I hung up on her mid-sentence, blocked the number, threw my phone across the room and screamed into a pillow until my throat burned. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my father. The first contact in 12 years. He didn't apologize. He talked about hardship, about bills, about how much they were struggling. At the very end, he asked if I could help them out. I forwarded the email to Dr. Fields with one line. There it is. Dr. Fields called me immediately, even though it was a Sunday. She didn't waste time. She said what my father had done was not reconciliation, it was a transaction. She asked me what I wanted, not what I felt pressured to give. We talked about forgiveness versus access, about how helping someone financially can become another form of control. By the end of the call, my head hurt, but something inside me felt clearer. By Monday morning, I made a decision. I emailed Naya and told her I was glad we had met. I said I understood she had been in a difficult position back then. I told her I was open to slowly building a relationship with her and her family, but only with firm boundaries. No money, no loans, no financial help of any kind, and no contact with our parents unless they took full responsibility for what they had done to me. Her response came quickly. Too quickly. She said she was disappointed. That family should support each other. That our parents really needed help. That I was being selfish with my success. Reading those words felt like being 16 again, like every old guilt button had been pressed at once. I didn't reply. Instead, I booked another session with Dr. Fields and a vacation I had been putting off for years. I needed distance. A few days later, Naya left me a voicemail apologizing for her email. She said she understood my boundaries now. Said she still wanted a relationship on my terms. I listened to it twice, trying to decide if it was sincere or if she was just adjusting her approach. I chose to give her one more chance, but I kept my guard up. While I was away, my father sent more emails, each one more desperate than the last. I didn't open them. I only read the subject lines. When I got back home, Naya asked if we could talk again. Just a phone call. I agreed, cautiously. The call started fine. She sounded calmer. She said she had started therapy. That part felt real. We talked about her son, Eli, about my work, about normal things. Then she mentioned that our parents were planning to visit her. She asked if I would consider meeting them, just for an hour, in a public place. My chest tightened immediately. I told her I wasn't ready. She pushed a little, then backed off when my voice went quiet. After we hung up, I called Dr. Fields. We had what she called an emergency session. She helped me see what I was really afraid of. Not seeing my parents. Wanting something from them I was never going to get. The next day, Naya texted again. She said our mother had cried all night after hearing I wouldn't meet her. Said our father was talking about driving to my city anyway. Panic set in fast. I blocked Naya's number. Ordered groceries instead of leaving my apartment. Told my assistant I was working from home. I felt ridiculous hiding like that, but my body didn't care about logic. It remembered too much. 2 days later, my doorman called to say a couple was asking for me downstairs. Wouldn't give their names. I knew immediately. I told him I wasn't accepting visitors. 5 minutes later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my father. He said they had driven 8 hours to see me. Said I was being childish. Said they deserved a chance to explain. I deleted the message and turned my phone off. That night, someone knocked on my door. Hard. I froze in bed, heart pounding, and checked the peephole. It was them. Standing there like they belonged. My mother called my name through the door. My father said they knew I was inside. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, shaking, until they finally left. The next morning, I called building security and told them not to let those people up again. The guard sounded concerned and asked if I needed the police. I said no, just prevention. Then I called Dr. Fields. She came over during her lunch break with a sandwich and sat with me while I cried on my kitchen floor. She told me what they were doing wasn't reconciliation. It was harassment. She reminded me, again, that I owed them nothing. That afternoon, I got an email from Naya. She was furious. She said I had humiliated our parents. Said they were staying in a cheap motel they couldn't afford because they were so desperate to see me. She mentioned medical bills. She mentioned Eli. She said I was being cruel. I didn't respond. I booked a flight to visit my friend Brielle instead. She had let me sleep on her couch years ago when I had nowhere else to go. If anyone understood, it was her. While I was packing, my phone rang from another unknown number. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, my doorman called again. He said there was a woman downstairs claiming to be my mother. Said she looked unwell. Said she was asking for me by name. My stomach dropped. I told him to call an ambulance if she needed help, but I wasn't coming down. He hesitated, then agreed. An hour later, as I was leaving for the airport, he told me the ambulance had taken her to a nearby hospital. Chest pains. He said it gently, like he expected me to react. I nodded and walked out. In the car, my hands shook so badly I had to sit on them. At the airport, Naya called again. I answered this time. She was crying. She said our mother had had a heart attack. She said it was my fault for stressing her out. I hung up and called Dr. Fields instead. She answered immediately. She told me something I will never forget. You are not responsible for your mother's health. This feels like another attempt to control you. Get on your plane. Take care of yourself. I did exactly that. At Brielle's place, I finally slept. I told her everything. She remembered the girl I had been back then. Broken, hungry, too proud to ask for help. She was furious on my behalf. She said they didn't deserve access to my life now, just because I had survived. It felt good to hear someone say that, without hesitation. On Sunday night, my father emailed again. He said my mother was stable. He said she had a stent and would be released in a few days. He ended the message by asking if I thought I had punished them enough. I showed Brielle. She rolled her eyes and called it textbook guilt. I knew she was right, but knowing doesn't erase conditioning overnight. When I flew home, there were flowers outside my apartment door. The card said they were staying nearby until midweek. Please call us. No apology. No acknowledgement of boundaries. Just another demand. I threw the flowers away and changed my number that night. The next morning, I got a photo sent from an unknown contact. My mother in a hospital bed. Pale. Small. The message said she might not have much time left. Did I really want to live with this regret? I blocked the number and called Dr. Fields. She suggested I take a break from social media and consider staying with someone for a while. Before I could leave, my doorman called again. This time, he said a young woman was downstairs with a small child. She claimed to be my sister's husband's wife. My pulse spiked. I felt trapped. I told him to send her up. I was done running. The woman who knocked on my door looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. A little boy asleep against her shoulder, his small hand fisted in her jacket. She introduced herself as Tiana's wife and apologized for showing up unannounced. Her voice was quiet, careful, like she was trying not to startle me. I stepped aside and let her in, more out of curiosity than trust. She laid the boy on my couch and tucked a blanket around him before sitting at my kitchen table. She told me she had only learned the truth about me a few years earlier. That she had been told I ran away, that I was unstable, that I cut contact on my own. She said hearing my story online had shaken her, that she confronted my sister and eventually my parents, that things had unraveled fast after that. She said she was ashamed of how quickly the conversation had turned to money. Said yes, she needed surgery, but they had insurance. Said my parents were the ones drowning financially, not them. I watched her face as she spoke, looking for manipulation. I didn't see it, just anger and fear and something like guilt by association. Then she told me why she had really come. She said my parents had been telling people for years that I abandoned them, that I stole from them, that they searched for me endlessly. She pulled out her phone and showed me posts, old ones, dated years after they had left me behind. Prayer requests. Stories carefully crafted to make them look like victims of a troubled daughter. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. She said she believed me, that she didn't want her son growing up thinking abandoning a child was ever acceptable, that she wanted me to know the truth, even if I never wanted a relationship with them. Before she left, she said the door was open, no pressure, no guilt, just honesty. After they were gone, I sat alone for hours, replaying everything. I called Dr. Fields and told her what I'd learned. She wasn't surprised. She said controlling people rewrite history to survive their own reflection. That night, my father sent another email. This one was angry. He threatened legal action, accused me of lying, demanded I take my story down and compensate them for the damage I had caused. I forwarded it to my lawyer, Aaron Pike. He called immediately, calm, direct. He said truth was a defense, told me to save everything and not respond. People who plan to sue don't usually announce it first. The next day, my sister called again, panic in her voice. She said things were getting bad, that our parents were turning on her now too, that she was scared. Aaron suggested we meet somewhere public with him present, just to hear everything out. I agreed, reluctantly. When we sat down together, the story that came out was worse than I expected. My parents had been living off my sister and her wife for years, controlling money, criticizing their parenting, showing up uninvited. When they were confronted, my father had grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks. I watched my sister unravel as she admitted how trapped she had felt her entire life. By the end of the meeting, something shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was a pattern, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. Aaron suggested immediate steps. Change locks, change passwords, separate finances, document everything. He gave my sister and Julian the name of another attorney and told them to stop minimizing what was happening. Watching my sister nod along, eyes glassy, I realized how deep our mother's control had always run. Different methods, same damage. That night, my phone exploded with messages from my parents. Accusations, threats, guilt wrapped in rage. I blocked every number. Then I called Julian's wife and asked if they were safe. She said they had changed the locks and were staying with friends. They were looking into a restraining order. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by dread. People like our mother don't let go quietly. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing nonstop. It was Julian's wife, hysterical. She said someone had broken into their house. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered everywhere, their laptop gone, photo albums missing, important documents. A note left behind that said, "Family matters should stay in the family." I told her to call the police immediately and said I was on my way. When I arrived, there was a patrol car outside. An officer was taking notes, skeptical that grandparents would do something like this. He suggested maybe it was a misunderstanding. Julian's wife showed him bruises on her arm, talked about the threats, the stalking, the escalation. He wrote things down but didn't promise much. After they left, we cleaned up in silence, finding more things missing as we went. Aaron arrived shortly after and didn't mince words. This changed everything. He said breaking and entering was serious, that we needed restraining orders immediately, that we should all stay somewhere secure for a few days. As we were leaving, Julian showed me a text from our father. 3 words. "We are watching you." I took a screenshot and sent it to Aaron. Without thinking, I told them to come stay with me. My building had security, cameras, a doorman who already knew not to let my parents up. That night, the 4 of us ate takeout in my living room. Eli played quietly on the floor, while the adults talked in low voices about next steps. It wasn't the reunion anyone would imagine, but it felt real, honest, like the truth had finally caught up with all of us. The next morning, Aaron filed emergency restraining orders. He said we had enough evidence, that we needed to appear in court to make them permanent. He also contacted a detective who took the break-in more seriously. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. Life settled into a strange routine. Work during the day, legal calls in between, Eli's laughter echoing through my apartment. I had lived alone for so long that the noise felt foreign, but not unwelcome. It felt like something growing where emptiness used to live. That illusion shattered when my doorman called to say there was a delivery. Flowers. I asked him to read the card. He paused, then read it aloud. "We know where you all are. This isn't over." I told him to send them back and call the police if needed. Then I called Aaron again. He said it only strengthened our case. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat alone in my kitchen and finally let myself feel everything. The fear, the anger, the grief, the strange hope. I cried silently, pressing a towel to my face so no one would hear. In the morning, Julian's wife found me making coffee and said quietly that it was okay not to be okay, that none of us were. We were safe for the moment, but none of us believed it was finished. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and forced normalcy. We worked remotely, cooked simple meals, and tried to keep Eli distracted with cartoons and toy cars. At night, every unexpected sound made us freeze. A car door slamming outside, footsteps in the hallway, the buzz of an unknown number lighting up a phone screen. We were together, but none of us felt settled. Safety felt temporary, borrowed. On Friday, Aaron called with an update. Security footage from a gas station near Julian and Naya's house showed my parents' car parked there during the time of the break-in. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Aaron said the evidence was strong. He sounded confident. I wanted to feel relieved, but my body stayed on edge, like it knew something else was coming. That night, it did. A brick through the window of Julian's car in my building's parking garage. No note this time, no explanation. Just shattered glass, glittering under fluorescent lights. Building security reviewed the footage. A man in a baseball cap. Face turned carefully away from the cameras. We couldn't prove it was my father, but none of us doubted it. Another police report. Another addition to the growing file. We tried to keep Eli from seeing the damage. Told him the car had an accident. He accepted that easily, the way children do when adults sound confident. Watching him, I felt a surge of anger so sharp it made my hands shake. This was not just about me anymore. They were terrorizing a child. Sunday night, we sat around my dining table planning for court. What to say, what to wear. How to explain years of manipulation without sounding unbelievable. How to describe fear that doesn't leave bruises until it suddenly does. I checked my phone and saw an email notification from my mother. Subject line, last chance. I almost deleted it, but opened it anyway. One sentence. If you go to court tomorrow, you will regret it for the rest of your life. I showed it to Aaron. He took a screenshot and added it to the file. He told me not to respond. Said threats like that only helped our case. That night, no one slept much. I kept checking the locks, listening, wondering how my life had narrowed down to this moment. Monday morning came with an odd calm. We dressed carefully, business casual, respectable. We drove separately, just in case. At the courthouse steps, Aaron greeted us with a firm handshake and steady confidence. As we walked inside, I saw my parents near the entrance. They looked smaller than I remembered. Older. My mother saw me and took a step forward. My father grabbed her arm and held her back. Inside the courtroom, I kept my eyes forward. When our case was called, Aaron laid out everything. The abandonment, the threats, the break-in, the texts, the flowers, the brick. The judge listened closely, asking pointed questions. When my parents spoke, they denied everything, claimed misunderstandings, claimed love, claimed victimhood. Then the judge asked a simple question. Had they left their minor child alone and moved away? My father hesitated, mumbled about hardship. The judge's expression changed. After a long pause, he granted the restraining orders. 3 years. No contact, no approaching homes or workplaces. Any violation would mean arrest. As we left the courtroom, my mother called my name once, softly. I did not turn around. Each step away felt like setting down something heavy I had carried since I was 16. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt too bright, like the world hadn't gotten the memo that everything had changed. Aaron shook our hands and told us we had done the right thing, that the orders were solid, that judges don't issue them lightly. I thanked him, but my body still felt hollow, like the adrenaline hadn't figured out it could stand down. Naya hugged me on the courthouse steps, a real hug this time. She cried into my shoulder and kept saying she was sorry, for not protecting me, for believing lies, for bringing this chaos back into my life. I hugged her back and told her we would figure it out. Not perfectly, not quickly, but together. It was the first time those words felt true. As we walked toward our cars, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. It was a photo of Eli playing in a backyard I didn't recognize, smiling, unaware. Underneath it were 4 words. This is not over yet. I felt cold all over. I showed Naya immediately, her face drained of color. She called Julian, her voice shaking, and told him to pick Eli up right away. I called Aaron from the car. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over. He told me to forward the message and drive straight home. Said this was a clear violation of the restraining order. Said he was calling the police and would meet us there. The drive felt endless. Every car behind me felt like a threat. When I got back to my apartment, Naya and Julian were already there, Eli clinging to Julian's leg, confused and scared. Naya was crying openly now, saying she should never have let this happen, saying she was terrified for her son. I wrapped my arms around her and told her we were not dealing with this alone. Aaron arrived with 2 officers shortly after. They took statements, examined the message, made calls, said they would send a patrol car to the friend's house where the photo had been taken. Said they would try to trace the number. They said all the right things, but I could tell they didn't fully understand how far my parents were willing to go. After the police left, we sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down on us. Naya suggested a hotel under different names. Julian suggested leaving the state for a while. I listened, anger building with every word. I stood up so suddenly it startled them both. I said I was done running, done hiding, done letting them control my life with fear. They had already stolen my childhood. I wasn't giving them my adulthood too. That night, we took turns staying awake. I sat by the window with the lights off, watching the street. Around 2 a.m, I saw a car I recognized. My father's old Buick. It drove past slowly, then again. On the 3rd pass, it parked across the street. He didn't get out. Just sat there, staring up at my building. I took photos and woke Julian. We watched together until the car finally pulled away. In the morning, I sent everything to Aaron. He said it was disturbing, but not technically a violation, that we needed to keep documenting. I hung up feeling defeated. Paper boundaries can only do so much. I helped Naya and Julian pack that afternoon. They decided to take Eli to a hotel with better security for a few days. I hugged them goodbye, promising to check in constantly. When the door closed behind them, my apartment felt too quiet again. I sat on the couch, and called Dr. Fields. I told her everything. She listened, then asked me a question that stopped me cold. What do you actually want from your parents? Not what you don't want. What you want. After I hung up with Dr. Fields, I sat in the quiet and forced myself to answer her question honestly. I took out a notebook and wrote it down. What do I want? The answer surprised me by how clear it was. I wanted to live without fear. I wanted a relationship with my sister and her family. I wanted to stop feeling responsible for my parents' choices. I wanted freedom. Nowhere on the page did I write reconciliation. Nowhere did I write forgiveness. I just wanted peace. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I would do. I emailed my parents. It was short, direct. I told them I knew they were watching my building. I told them I knew they were not going to stop. I said we would meet one last time. Noon the next day, a coffee shop on 8th Street, just me. No lawyers, no police. After that, they would leave us alone forever. I didn't tell Naya. I didn't tell Julian. I didn't tell Aaron or Dr. Fields. This wasn't about strategy. It was about ending something that had been chasing me since I was 16. My father replied within minutes. We will be there. No threats. No pleading. Just confirmation. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Making the decision felt like setting down a weight I had been carrying for years. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not to impress them, but to remind myself who I was now. I took a ride share to the coffee shop and arrived early. I chose a table where I could see the door. Ordered a drink I barely touched. Waited. They walked in right at noon. They looked older than they had in court, smaller somehow. My mother saw me first and froze. My father guided her toward the table. We sat in silence for a long moment. I looked at them and felt something unexpected. Nothing. No anger. No longing. Just distance. I spoke first. I told them I didn't call this meeting to hear excuses or to give them money or to rebuild anything. I told them it was over, that they had lost not just a court case, but their place in my life, that they had lost their grandchildren, that if they continued to harass or stalk us, I would expose every message, every threat, every lie to everyone they knew. My mother cried, said they just wanted their family back, said they were getting older and didn't want to die alone. I told her she should have thought about that before abandoning her 16-year-old daughter, before lying for years, before terrorizing a child. My father grew angry, called me ungrateful, said I owed them for raising me. I laughed, not kindly, not loudly, just once. I told him no parent is owed gratitude for doing the bare minimum and then disappearing. I stood up to leave and gave them one last warning. If they contacted any of us again, I would protect my family by any means necessary. As I walked away, my mother asked if I hated them. I turned back and told her the truth. I didn't hate them. I felt nothing. And that was their loss, not mine. I called Naya as soon as I stepped outside. She was upset that I had gone alone, scared of what could have happened, but she listened without interrupting as I told her everything. By the time I finished, her voice sounded steadier. She said maybe it was something she needed to do one day too. We agreed to stay close for the next few weeks. No secrets, no solo decisions. I packed a bag and joined Naya, Julian, and Eli at their hotel that evening. Eli ran to me when I walked in and wrapped his arms around my legs like it was the most natural thing in the world. He started calling me auntie without being prompted. That almost broke me. Naya's eyes filled with tears when she heard it. Julian just nodded, like he understood exactly what that moment meant. For a few days, we lived in a strange waiting period, expecting retaliation, checking phones constantly, flinching at every unexpected sound, but nothing happened. No calls, no messages, no cars circling. The silence felt unreal, like the calm after a storm when you're not sure if it's actually over. A week passed, then another. Aaron checked in regularly. He said the restraining orders were holding, said my parents had returned to their home state, said we should stay vigilant but start living again. Slowly, we did. Naya and Julian went back to their house after installing cameras and changing everything they could think of. I went back to my apartment. Work resumed. Life crept forward. Months later, Julian accepted a job closer to my city. They moved into a house about 20 minutes away. We started having dinner together every Sunday. Nothing fancy. Simple food, loud conversations. Eli's toys scattered across the floor. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes conversations went quiet unexpectedly. Sometimes old wounds surfaced. But it was real, chosen, safe. I kept waiting to feel something about my parents. Guilt, grief, regret. It never really came. What I felt instead was relief. Like I had finally put down something heavy I didn't realize I was still carrying. About 6 months after the coffee shop meeting, Aaron forwarded me a letter from my mother. He had insisted on screening it first. It was different from the others. No demands, no guilt, just acknowledgement. She wrote that they had failed me, that they were in counseling, that they would respect the restraining order, that they hoped one day I might be willing to hear a real apology, but understood if that day never came. I didn't respond. I put the letter in a drawer and closed it gently. Not as forgiveness, not as reconciliation, but as proof that I had the right to decide what happened next. Life didn't magically become easy. I still go to therapy every week. I still flinch when my doorbell rings unexpectedly. I still have nightmares about coming home to an empty house. But I'm healing. We all are. I'm not defined by what was done to me anymore. I'm defined by what I built after, by the family I chose, by the boundaries I learned to defend, and by the quiet certainty that I never have to prove my worth to the people who failed to see it. Healing did not arrive all at once. It came in uneven pieces, in ordinary moments that didn't look dramatic from the outside. It showed up when I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed, when I walked into my apartment at night and didn't automatically scan the hallway for shadows, when I realized I had gone an entire afternoon without thinking about my parents at all. Sunday dinners became a rhythm. Sometimes we ate takeout on the floor. Sometimes Julian cooked and filled the house with smells that made it feel lived in. Eli liked to sit next to me and tell long, winding stories that only made sense to him. Naya laughed more than I remembered her ever laughing as a kid. There were still awkward moments, still silences where the past hovered between us, but it no longer owned the room. I talked about all of it with Dr. Fields, about the guilt that surfaced unexpectedly, about the anger that still surprised me, about the strange sadness of finally accepting that my parents would never be who I needed them to be. She reminded me that grief doesn't require death. Sometimes it comes from letting go of an illusion. Sometimes it comes from accepting reality exactly as it is. One evening, as Eli was falling asleep on the couch, he asked me why I didn't talk to my parents. The question landed softly, without judgment. I told him some people hurt others because they don't know how to love safely. That it was okay to walk away from people who made you feel scared or small, even if you shared the same last name. He nodded, like that made perfect sense, and rolled over, already half asleep. That moment stayed with me. It reminded me how much had changed, how the choices I made now didn't just protect me, but modeled something different for the next generation. Boundaries, safety, self-respect, things I never learned at home. Work continued to grow. My days were full in a way that felt satisfying instead of overwhelming. I hired more people, I delegated. I trusted. Success stopped feeling like a shield and started feeling like a tool. Something I could use to build the life I actually wanted, not just escape the one I came from. Every now and then, I would think back to that empty house, to the envelope on the counter, to the sentence that was supposed to end me. You will figure it out. At the time, it felt like abandonment disguised as confidence, like a dismissal dressed up as faith. Now, years later, I understood it differently, not as something they gave me, but as something I took. I did figure it out, not because they believed in me, but because I believed in myself when no one else did. And that made all the difference. There are still days when the past sneaks up on me without warning. A smell, a phrase, a certain tone of voice can pull me back into that house, into that version of myself who thought love had to be earned through usefulness. When that happens, I don't fight it the way I used to. I acknowledge it. I breathe. I remind myself where I am now and who I have become. Naya and I are still learning how to be sisters again. It isn't simple or linear. Some days feel easy, almost normal. Other days are heavier, filled with conversations we avoided for years. We talk about our childhood honestly now, about how our mother divided us without ever saying it out loud, about how silence became survival, about how fear was mistaken for loyalty. Those conversations hurt, but they also loosened something that had been knotted tight inside both of us. Julian remains steady through it all. He doesn't rush healing or demand progress. He listens. He shows up. He protects his family without turning it into a performance. Watching him parent Eli has been quietly healing for me. He is patient. He apologizes when he's wrong. He doesn't confuse authority with control. Sometimes I catch myself studying these moments like they're lessons I was never taught. Eli has started preschool. He comes home with paint on his hands and stories about friends whose names change every week. He doesn't know the full story, and he doesn't need to. What he knows is that he is safe, that the adults around him are predictable, that love doesn't disappear without warning. That alone feels like a victory. I still see Dr. Fields every week. Some sessions are intense, others are quiet. Sometimes we talk about my parents. Sometimes we don't mention them at all. Healing, she reminds me, is not about erasing the past. It's about shrinking its power, making room for a future that isn't dictated by old wounds. I've stopped waiting for some final emotional shift. No grand forgiveness, no sudden peace that ties everything up neatly. What I have instead is something steadier, a sense of ownership over my life, over my choices, over who gets access to me and who does not. When people ask if I regret cutting my parents off, I answer honestly. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that it ever came to this. But I do not regret choosing safety. I do not regret choosing clarity. I do not regret choosing myself. There is a quiet strength in that decision. Not loud, not dramatic, just firm. And it carries me forward, one ordinary, hard-won day at a time. 6 months after everything settled, Eli turned 4. Naya and Julian asked if we could have his birthday at my place. I said yes without hesitation. The apartment filled with balloons, streamers, and the kind of noise I once avoided. A cake from a bakery, Eli picked himself. Wrapping paper everywhere. Friends stopping by throughout the afternoon. Laughter bouncing off walls that used to echo with silence. At one point, I stepped into the kitchen just to breathe. I watched from the doorway as Julian lifted Eli into the air, spinning him until both of them were laughing too hard to stand straight. Naya stood nearby taking photos, her face soft in a way I rarely saw when we were younger. My apartment, once a place of retreat and control, was alive. warm, shared. That image stayed with me. It felt like a quiet answer to a question I had been asking since I was 16. What does family look like when it isn't built on fear? What does love look like when it doesn't disappear? If you listened all the way to the end, thank you. It truly means more to me than you know. Before we wrap up, go ahead and like this video and share it if the story blessed you. I still think about that note my mother left behind sometimes. You will figure it out. At the time, it felt like rejection, like abandonment wrapped in a single careless sentence. Now, I see it differently. Not as something given to me, but as something I claimed. I figured it out despite them, not because of them. I figured out how to survive when no one was coming back, how to build a life from nothing, how to choose people who choose me, how to walk away from those who only love conditionally. I figured out that blood does not guarantee safety, and distance does not mean failure. I am not healed in a perfect, polished way. I still flinch sometimes. I still go to therapy. I still have moments when the past knocks unexpectedly. But it no longer runs my life. It no longer defines me. I am defined by what I built after, by the family I chose, by the boundaries I defended, by the quiet, steady belief that I deserve peace. For another story that fits your mood, click the video on the left. To hear the latest one, choose the video on the right.
My daughter told me through tears, "Auntie hit me because I got a better grade than her son." I didn't say a word. I took her to urgent care. And later I started doing what made my brother's wife regret everything she had done. I used to believe I had a good read on people. I could tell when someone was hiding something or when a smile had teeth behind it. But when it came to my brother's wife, I missed every sign. Not just once. Over and over again. Her name is Valerie. She married my brother Chris 8 years ago, and from the start she had a way of making everything seem like a performance. She smiled at the right times, offered to help at family dinners, asked about my work, and always made a show of giving me a birthday presents with way too much ribbon. But it always felt staged. There was something behind it I couldn't place. I should have tried harder to figure it out. He never liked Mia. I know that now. Back then, I told myself I was imagining it. The way her smile would stiffen when Mia talked about her science fair, or the way she'd interrupt her halfway through a story. Valerie's son Liam is a sweet kid, but school isn't his thing. He likes video games and bikes and anything that doesn't involve books. Which is fine. But Valerie always seemed uncomfortable about the fact that Mia loved learning. I think she saw my daughter's curiosity as a threat to her own kid. As if Mia's achievements somehow cast a shadow over Liam. The competition wasn't real. Mia never bragged, never compared, but Valerie made it real. So I let it go. I wanted peace in the family. I wanted to believe that, deep down, Valerie just didn't know how to connect with her. I convinced myself that things were fine. Until that Tuesday. I'd had a late meeting at work and asked Chris if Mia could stay with them after school. She'd been there before and nothing had ever seemed off. When I came to pick her up, she looked tired, but I thought it was just a long day. She got in the car quietly, stared out the window the whole drive, and when I handed her her favorite sandwich from the deli, she just held it. I kept glancing over, asking if everything was okay. She nodded, said she was just tired. At home, she headed for the bathroom to shower, but then she paused at the door. That's when I saw it. Just a quick flash of skin where her shirt lifted. A purple mark, deep and ugly, spreading under her ribs. I asked her what happened. At first she froze. I could see her calculating. Then the tears came fast and hard. And so did the truth. She told me she had gotten her science quiz back that day. 98%. She was proud, and she should have been. She said she showed it to Liam after school, hoping they could talk about it, maybe even study together next time. Apparently Valerie had seen the paper. She made a comment like, "Nice, but science doesn't really matter unless you're going to be a doctor." Mia shrugged it off, but Liam made some joke about how he'd never get that kind of grade. Mia laughed, not at him, just nervously. That's when Valerie told her not to act like she was better than anyone. Later, when Mia went to get her backpack from the hallway, Valerie followed her. Told her she needed to stop showing off. That it was rude to make her cousin feel stupid. And then she hit her. Flat across the side. Not a slap. Not a push. A hit. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys, told Mia to get in the car, and drove straight to urgent care. They checked her over, documented the bruises, and asked if she felt safe at home. I told them what happened. A nurse quietly slipped away and made a call. By the time we left, the report was already filed. That night my phone rang 5 times. Chris. I didn't answer. I sat at the kitchen table while Mia slept in her room, rereading the discharge notes. Suspected non-accidental injury. Abuse concern flagged. I thought about every comment Valerie had made over the years. Every time she said Mia was too intense, too sensitive, too smart for her own good. I thought about how I had let her babysit. I thought about how I had let my daughter believe that was normal. I stayed up until morning. I wasn't going to let this disappear. I wasn't going to settle for an apology or a family meeting. Valerie had crossed a line, and I was going to make sure she never came near my daughter again. What I didn't know then was how deep this would go. How much would come to light. How many people had been staying silent just like I had. But now I had no doubt. I was going to destroy her. I didn't call Chris the next morning. I didn't owe him that. Instead I called a lawyer. Her name was Dana Marks, and she wasn't cheap, but I wasn't playing defense. I wanted someone who understood custody, domestic assault, and how to handle a case when the abuser wasn't a spouse, but a relative. I explained everything, and when I mentioned that the urgent care had already filed a report, Dana paused and asked me if I wanted to press charges. Yes. I wanted Valerie prosecuted. I wanted her to lose everything. We met that same day. Dana walked me through next steps, getting Mia's statement formally recorded, contacting Child Protective Services, requesting a restraining order, and preparing for potential pushback from my brother's side of the family. She didn't sugarcoat anything. It was going to be ugly. But she also told me something I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't going to be her first case involving someone like Valerie. That night I finally answered Chris's call. I told him to come over without her. He showed up looking like he hadn't slept either. He sat down at the kitchen table like he always did, but I didn't offer coffee. I didn't smile. I told him everything Mia had told me. At first he just stared at me. Then he laughed like it couldn't be real. He said Valerie wouldn't do that. That Mia must have misunderstood. Maybe she fell. Maybe she bruised herself playing with Liam. I handed him a copy of the urgent care report. His hands shook when he read the words, "Suspicion of child abuse." He asked me if I was really going to involve the police. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They were already involved. He left after 10 minutes. No goodbye. 2 days later, CPS came to our door. Routine check. They talked to Mia privately. I waited in the hallway pretending to scroll on my phone, listening for signs that she was okay. Later, the caseworker told me Mia's statement was clear, consistent, and heartbreaking. But then something unexpected happened. A week after the CPS visit, I got a call from Dana. She'd been contacted by another parent, a woman whose daughter used to go to the same tutoring group as Liam. She had heard what happened through her own circle and wanted to talk. Dana arranged a call. Her daughter had once come home from Valerie's house with a bruise too. Same story. Said she got too loud while playing inside and Valerie lost it. The girl never went back and the mother hadn't reported it. Said she didn't think anyone would believe her. Valerie had a way of making herself look like the responsible adult. Now she wanted to help. We filed to bring her in as a witness. It wasn't just about Mia anymore. There was a pattern. When the police finally interviewed Valerie, she played dumb. Claimed Mia was lying. That she would never hit a child. She even tried to say I was unstable, trying to turn my daughter against her because I was jealous of their family dynamic. But she didn't know we had photos, medical records, a second witness, and then a break. Chris's mother-in-law called me. He said Valerie was panicking. That she had confessed, not in those words but close enough. Said she'd lost her temper and taught the girl a lesson. Her mother had recorded part of the call. Dana almost smiled when I told her. We filed for a restraining order. It was granted immediately. Valerie wasn't allowed near Mia or our house. Liam wasn't allowed over anymore either. And while I hated that, I knew it wasn't his fault. But I wasn't taking chances. Chris didn't call for days. When he finally did, it wasn't to apologize. It was to say Valerie was pressing back. That she'd lawyered up. That she was telling people Mia made the whole thing up for attention. I told him to be careful which side he picked. Because this time I wasn't backing down. It started with whispers. A friend of mine from Mia's school called one morning. She didn't even sound surprised, just tired. Said she'd heard from 2 other parents who'd had uncomfortable experiences with Valerie, and now they were asking questions. One of them apparently had tried to file a complaint months ago. Her daughter had come home from a sleepover crying, saying she didn't want to go back. No bruises, nothing visible, just fear. Valerie told them their daughter was overly sensitive. They dropped it. He'll know. Dana took their statements. Both women were willing to testify. One of them had even kept a journal, with the exact date of the sleepover and what her daughter had told her afterward. Dana said it was gold. I didn't realize how important that would be until the state attorney called us 2 days later to say they were taking the case. The report from urgent care, the additional testimonies, and the voicemail from Valerie's own mother. It was more than enough. The words were different now. This wasn't just about a slap. The DA used terms like child cruelty, malicious intent, pattern of behavior. I felt sick hearing it, even though it was exactly what I'd been fighting for. I didn't want Mia anywhere near these words. But I needed them to be real. Because this woman had built her life around a lie, that she was a good mother, a respectable wife, the trustworthy one in the family. And no one ever challenged her. Till now. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Chris showed up at my door. No warning. I almost didn't open it, but Mia wasn't home and I needed to see him. He looked hollow. Not angry. Not defensive. Just broken. He said he'd overheard Valerie on the phone with her sister 2 nights before. He thought he was asleep. She was ranting, saying she should have hit the girl harder if this was the thanks she got. Then she laughed. Said she wasn't going to apologize because it was just discipline. Chris told me he sat there in the hallway for a long time after that, listening to his own heartbeat. Realizing he didn't know who he'd married. Then he asked something that took the air out of the room. Did I think she'd ever hurt Liam? It hit me like a punch. I had never said it out loud, never even let myself think it. But I could see it now, clear as day. The temper, the way she'd talk about him sometimes like he was a burden. Like he was someone she had to manage instead of love. If she could hit someone else's child for doing better in school, what did she do to her own when he didn't meet her expectations? Chris didn't say much else. Just that he was moving out. He'd sent Liam to stay with his parents. He said he was sorry. Really sorry. I believed him. But it didn't fix anything. The charges came down 3 days later. 2 counts of child endangerment, 1 felony, 1 misdemeanor. Valerie was arrested at her house. She looked stunned, like none of it made sense. Like the world had turned on her unfairly. She was released on bail, but it was already over. The court issued a protective order against her. CPS filed an emergency petition, not just to keep her away from Mia, but from Liam too. I didn't ask for that part. It happened on its own. And it told me everything I needed to know. Then came the calls. Cousins. Aunts. Family I hadn't heard from in months. Some of them were supportive. Some told me I was overreacting. That kids lie, or that I should have handled this privately. One even asked if I was trying to ruin Valerie's life. I didn't care anymore. I wasn't trying to ruin Valerie's life. He did that herself. I was just making sure my daughter never had to see her again. Mia asked me that night if Valerie was going to jail. I told her probably. She looked up at me and said good. Then she went back to drawing. No big scene. No questions. Just peace. And it broke me a little. Because that's how long she'd been holding her breath. Like she was finally safe enough to exhale. But I wasn't done. The trial was coming. Dana said Valerie had hired her own attorney. Someone who'd built a career on painting mothers as victims of vindictive accusations. That didn't scare me. I had facts. I had statements. I had Mia. And I was going to bury Valerie in the truth. The first court date wasn't even the real trial, just a preliminary hearing, but I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Dana warned me it would get ugly, and she was right. Valerie arrived looking polished, calm, even smug. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking man with gray hair and wireframe glasses, acted like he was prepping for a celebrity case. Chris sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. Liam wasn't there, thank God. The judge went through the motions, confirming the charges. Valerie's lawyer tried to argue that the felony should be dropped right away because the incident was exaggerated. The prosecutor shut that down fast, outlining the medical report, the witness statements, the prior concerns from other families. Valerie rolled her eyes like she was listening to a boring documentary. Then came the surprise. Just as the judge was about to move on, the prosecutor said they had obtained additional evidence that morning. Evidence they hadn't known existed until a few days ago. Dana leaned forward. I mirrored her without thinking. It was a video. Security recording. From inside Chris and Valerie's own house. Apparently, Chris had forgotten that he and Valerie installed a small camera in the hallway 2 years ago. Originally to monitor Liam and the dog when they weren't home. He told the police about it during his second interview, not thinking it mattered. But the police subpoenaed the footage anyway. They found what they needed. The prosecutor pulled up a still image first. It wasn't graphic. It wasn't violent. Just a frozen moment of Valerie leaning toward Mia in the hallway. But the body language said everything. The angle of her arm. The way Mia was pulled against the wall. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't exaggeration. It was real. Valerie's face drained of color. Her lawyer stood up so fast his chair screeched. He demanded to know why this was being introduced without warning. The prosecutor calmly explained that the footage had been authenticated minutes before the hearing began and was now legally admissible. Then the audio clip came. Not the whole thing, just a few seconds. Valerie's voice, unmistakable, sharp and irritated, saying, "Don't you ever walk around here bragging again." My stomach twisted. Hearing it out loud was different from reading it in a report. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked stunned. Chris's head dropped into his hands. Valerie finally cracked. She blurted out something like it was taken out of context. The judge warned her to stay silent. Her lawyer grabbed her arm to shush her, but she pulled away from him and said she never meant to hurt anybody. Loud enough that everyone heard it. Dana wrote something on her notepad and slid it to me. She just admitted it. The judge rescheduled everything for a formal arraignment and granted an extended restraining order. And then he added something I didn't expect. Because of the new evidence, the prosecution would be adding an additional charge: intentional harm to a minor. Valerie didn't walk out of the courtroom looking smug anymore. She looked like someone who had finally realized she wasn't untouchable. We left quietly, but before I reached the parking lot, one of Chris's aunts stopped me. She hugged me and whispered that she had always suspected something was off, and she was sorry for not speaking up sooner. Another family member texted later, saying they were praying for Mia. Slowly, the divide in the family started to shift, this time in my direction. But the biggest surprise didn't come until that evening. Chris called and said he had gone back to the house to grab some things for Liam. And while he was searching through one of the drawers in Valerie's home office, he found something. A notebook. Liam's handwriting. A list of rules he had written for himself. Rules like don't make mom mad and don't show her my tests if they are bad and don't talk too much when she is cleaning. Then the one that made Chris break down on the phone. Don't cry if she gets upset. I sat there gripping the counter listening to my brother sob for the first time since we were kids. He said he didn't know. He said he should have known. He said he failed his son. And in that moment I realized this story was no longer about revenge. It was about saving every child she had ever scared into silence. And the trial hadn't even started yet. Court felt more like surgery than justice. It wasn't fast, it wasn't clean. It cut deep and slow, exposing everything. But this time I didn't flinch. Valerie came in each day dressed like she still believed in her own performance. Crisp blouse, hair done, eyes forward. Like the version of herself she had sold to everyone for years might somehow carry her through this. Her lawyer stuck to the same script. She was stressed, she had no prior offenses, it was a moment of poor judgment, and Mia had misunderstood her intentions. But that argument didn't survive the first morning. The hallway footage was shown in full. You could hear it, that shift in tone from passive to venom in her voice. The way she moved toward Mia. Even though the hit itself wasn't caught on camera, the build-up was worse. You could see the coldness, the control, the intent. People in the gallery went quiet. The judge didn't react, but the jury did. Then came Liam's notebook. Chris had turned it in not as revenge but out of guilt. He testified about how he found it in Valerie's desk drawer. The prosecution entered it into evidence page by page. Dana sat beside me watching the jury more than the words. On the screen they showed one page. Rule 6. If she's mad, don't speak until she says. Rule 8. If I get a bad grade, hide it. Rule 12. Don't cry. Crying makes it worse. The courtroom felt colder after that. Valerie's lawyer tried to dismiss it. Said kids write dramatic things, it doesn't prove abuse. But then the prosecution brought in a child psychologist who explained what that list meant. That it wasn't imagination. It was a survival strategy. Next they played Mia's recorded interview. She never cried during it. She didn't sound scared. Just quiet. Careful. The way she described the moment in the hallway, how she wanted to show Liam her test score, how proud she was, and how quickly it all turned. How she remembered Valerie's voice in her ear, telling her not to flaunt herself. How it wasn't the first time, just the first time she'd left a bruise. One of the jurors wiped her eyes after that. And then came the text message. Valerie had sent it months before to the other mom, the one whose daughter left their house crying. Dana had been sitting on this piece of evidence until the perfect moment. The D read it out loud to the court. If parents don't discipline their kids, someone has to. Kids today are too soft. The room went still. Valerie didn't even look surprised it was brought up. It was almost like she forgot she had ever said it. She looked hollow. Chris testified too. He took the stand and admitted he hadn't seen the signs. That he believed his wife over his instincts. That he failed his son. He held it together until the D asked him directly if he believed Mia was telling the truth. He looked over at me just for a second and said yes. Then he broke down. The prosecutor closed strong. They didn't go for emotion. They went for precision. They said this wasn't just about one child being hurt. It was about a pattern of control and violence masked as parenting. And Valerie had gotten away with it for years. They asked for 10 years. No parole for the first 6. No contact with minors, ever. Valerie's lawyer asked for probation. The judge didn't take long. 10 years in state prison. No parole until year 6. 5 years probation afterward. And a permanent restriction from working with, fostering, or even being alone with a minor ever again. Valerie didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just blinked slowly as if this was happening to someone else. I watched her get let out of the courtroom in cuffs. Her hands weren't shaking. Maybe she thought this would still pass. Maybe she thought the world would believe her version even now. But it didn't. That night Mia and I sat on the couch. I told her everything. She didn't ask for details. She didn't ask about Valerie. She just looked at me and said, "So we can go back to normal now?" I said yes. Then she asked if we could go to the library tomorrow. She wanted to check out a book on geology. And in that moment, everything snapped back into place. The air felt clear again. And I knew this wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning of the world she deserved. Thanksgiving was quiet that year. We stayed home. Just me and me. No big table, no folding chairs, no background chatter of football from the living room. I roasted a chicken because neither of us liked turkey, and we spent most of the day playing board games on the floor. She beat me 3 times in a row. It was perfect. And then 2 weeks before Christmas, Chris called. I hadn't heard from him since the sentencing. He texted me once, a short message thanking me for protecting Liam too, but I hadn't responded. I didn't know what to say to a man who had lived beside all of it and done nothing until it was too late. But now he was calling, asking if we'd come to his parents' house for a small dinner. No holiday drama, no cousins, no one else. Just us. He said Liam had been asking about Mia a lot. That he missed her. I said I'd think about it. Mia said yes before I finished telling her. So we went. Chris opened the door himself. No fanfare. He looked older, like he'd aged a decade in 6 months, but lighter somehow too, like the weight he'd been carrying had finally been acknowledged. Liam ran out from the kitchen and hugged Mia like he hadn't seen her in years. They disappeared down the hallway, probably to talk about school or Minecraft or whatever else they used to bond over. We sat in the living room. His parents brought out tea, then gave us space. Chris didn't circle around it. He just said he was sorry. But not the kind of sorry people say to get it over with. He told me he had been afraid. That part of him had seen it, little things, but he let himself believe Valerie's excuses. That Liam was dramatic. That Mia was showing off. That I was too protective. He said he'd seen her lose her temper before. That once, when Liam had gotten AC on a math quiz, Valerie had made him sit at the table without dinner until he finished, proving he knew it. He said he remembered thinking that was harsh. And then he did nothing. That was what haunted him, he said. Not what she did. What he didn't. He told me that finding that notebook was the worst and best thing that had ever happened to him. Because it was the moment he stopped defending her. The moment he started seeing his son clearly. He said he's in therapy now. Liam too. He doesn't let himself forget what happened. He doesn't try to explain it away. And he said something I'll never forget. You saved both of them. You didn't just save Mia. You saved my son from a life I didn't even realize I was forcing him to survive. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, I just didn't have the energy for tears anymore. It felt heavier than crying. Like the full weight of the last year was settling for the first time. We ate. We laughed a little. Mia and Liam disappeared into the kitchen for dessert, and Chris showed me a picture Liam had drawn in therapy. It was him and Mia standing next to a big red volcano, smiling. He said apparently, Mia is the reason Liam wants to start doing better in school. I told him to hold on to that. Before we left, Chris walked us out. The night was cold and there was frost on the car windows. He looked at Mia, then back at me, and said the one thing he hadn't said until now. I believe her. Every word. I just wish I had believed her sooner. Mia didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She slipped her hand into mine and we went home. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight alone.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment in the story has touched your heart, brought you some reflection, some emotion, and hope. Thank you for taking the time to experience it with us, and hope that each next story will always accompany you on your life journey.